Hey, I'm Riggers. Thanks for dropping in. Today I'd like to talk about one of my favourite role-playing games, which is from the Final Fantasy series. It is Final Fantasy 13-2, of which I still have my original childhood copy of, which was purchased a few weeks after release, and it was on sale for £25, which is not bad. So I've had it since I think it was literally 3 weeks after it first came out in the UK in 2012, which would have been the following year after its original release in 2011 in Japan. I also have this alternate slipcover PlayStation 3 one, which has the normal cover underneath. And I do have because it's one of my absolute favorite games, I did get the collector's limited edition, crystal edition as it's called, which comes with all these goodies: t-shirt, soundtrack, art book, art print, postcards, all that good stuff. I'm going to do this on its own video. I've already been planning that for a long time, since around about the same time I did the 25th anniversary edition unboxing. So this is going to be its own video. I just wanted to show you, like, I only have a small amount of collector's editions, but this is how much it's one of my favourite games, which is why I bought that. And that listing, it was an eBay listing that I got that with. It came with the lightning flag I have up there, and this, and it came with an alternate slipcover copy of Final Fantasy 13, which has different art, and a leather bound strategy guide, and a few other bits. So yeah, I love this game. Now, why do I love the game? Okay, so when I was a kid, I watched a family member play through most of the first Final Fantasy 13, and I loved watching them play through that. And I'd grown up playing Final Fantasy 10, Final Fantasy 12, Crisis Core, Final Fantasy 7, and I was really cemented within the gameplay and styles and the richness of the universes, the characters, creativity of all the different Final Fantasy sub-universes. So I was quite familiar with the characters of Lightning, Hope, Saz, Snow, Vanille, Fang, Sarah, all that. And I was really interested with the sequel. I remember back then, they were on the way out, but they were still a thing in terms of being somewhat more mainstream. Getting a monthly magazine for Xbox, I only ever got like 4 issues of it as a kid. I just bought them on very random occasions, but I remember I was bought one around about the time, like leading up to Final Fantasy 13-2 coming out, and I read this multi-page spread talking all about the game, and I ended up downloading the demo of the game from the Xbox Live Marketplace on my Xbox 360, and I tried it out, and it takes place during the second chapter, around the beginning of the second chapter, and it introduced you to the collecting monsters aspects, and you sort of thrown into it with the active time battle system and the exploration and the characters of Sarah, Noel, and Mog, and it's just right from that demo and following on from the fact that I'd already quite enjoyed watching someone else play through the Final Fantasy 13 universe and grown up playing the other Final Fantasy games, some of them. I was really excited for the game. I was excited for the monster catching aspects. It reminded me of Pokemon. I was excited just for a new Final Fantasy on the next generation, as it was at the time, that I could own myself and play, because I hadn't owned or played through a newer Final Fantasy for a few years at that point. So I was really excited for that. And when I got the game, I sprinted through it in, I think it didn't take me more than a couple of weeks on and off. I remember some memories of like getting up early, which was rare for me, and booting it up and playing some 13-2 before going to high school, which I look back on very fondly. And I just loved the game's whole structure with its multiple chapters, the Historia Crux, where you're travelling through time and there's all these different locations and you go up and down the timelines, changing time, going through different alternate versions of events in history, and exploring the characters' own personal backstories. They're wrestling with their own demons. There's various different sub-stories and side plots and bonus quests and puzzles and monster hunts and all sorts of different cool things going, and I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed leveling up my monsters and training my team, finding secrets, traversing different lands. It had so much more content. After I eventually completed the game, I ended up in my first playthrough something stupid like 160 hours or something I put into it. I tried to get like every single monster in the game, like basically like it was one of the rare times I basically wanted to do 100% the game. And I got almost every what they're called fragments, the collectible crystals in the game. I unlocked almost everything they could possibly do. I think the only thing I never really put time into was the Chocobo racing. I never really bothered betting on that for whatever reasons. I have very few memories of that. I liked the DLC that was released at the time. I used to like wait for the new DLC announcements constantly, and I bought almost all of them. I never ended up playing through the last couple though. They came out just at the point I'd stopped really playing the game, and at that point when I ended up with Xbox points, Microsoft points, I ended up spending them because I used to get them like once or twice a year for like birthday and Christmas. I ended up spending them on other stuff, and I never ended up playing through the Lightning and Snow DLCs, which I didn't end up buying until years later on an account that ended up being stolen anyway. So I need to rebuy them again now. So if I want to use them on the Series X, but I've heard the game's a bit glitchy on the Series X anyway, so yeah. I've done 2 playthroughs on my 360, my original childhood copy, and then a copy as an adult, which I started in lockdown, and then paused for a few years, and only finished last year. You know, I got distracted with other stuff, but, you know, lockdown and everything, but I suppose I've not really gone into why it's one of my favourite games, but I really enjoyed the time traveling aspects of the game, because that's a storytelling trope that's always appealed to me. I've grown up liking things like Doctor Who, Back to the Future. You know, I like the sci-fi elements. So it's sci-fi fantasy, which I find interesting, and I've also quite like Pokemon or other games where you fight different monsters. Like for example, like Yu-Gi-Oh, you got different cards and you fight different monsters. Specifically, I grew up playing Yu-Gi-Oh, the Duelists of the Roses, or other various games where you collect monsters and battle them, and sort of building up my own little team. And it's the fact that we just all these different locations and worlds, and I just found it a really immersive experience. The gameplay loop, the actual combat was really satisfying, and I really enjoyed the strategies of building different teams, like how the combat works. Being able to have my loadout of, let's say, I set everyone to be healers and being medics, and then I can make 2 of them attackers, commandos, and then 1 of them is a sentinel, to like defense, and customizing all that. Yeah, it was a really fun game for me. It was certainly one of my absolute favourite games to play on the Xbox 360, which I think an exceptionally small amount of people would actually specifically recommend. You know, if you have an Xbox 360, play Final Fantasy 13 too. But I definitely think it's one of the best games to play on there. Like I say, I sank 160 hours just into my first playthrough when I would have been 12 years old. And it's kind of crazy. I remember back then, when I was a kid, everyone was just going on about Assassin's Creed and GTA. And now those games are still, well, Assassin's Creed isn't really popular with kids today. But I work in education, and the games that the overwhelming majority of kids seem to play is pretty much just Roblox and Fortnite, which is kind of sad, really. I think with the young generations, engaging with normal games is largely a lost medium. You do have some that are like, oh, I love Resident Evil, I love Red Dead Redemption, but I'm yet to meet a single like child or teenager today, out of all the ones I've worked with over the last few years. They don't know what Final Fantasy is. They don't know, the overwhelming majority of them don't know what the Elder Scrolls is. They don't know what, like, looking at my shelf here, don't know what Silent Hill is. I mean, in various aspects, if we have franchises that have been absent for a long time, that can make sense. But I mean, it's just crazy. You got kids who don't know what like Gran Turismo is or Mass Effect. They haven't even heard of Mafia. But it's kind of sad. There's a lot of it's natural, I suppose. Yeah, there's a lot of franchises that get left by the wayside. But I mean, Final Fantasy is still a big franchise, and very few young people today know about it, and that does surprise me. So I just wanted to highlight this as a great throwback game, a great role-playing game in general. I do think it's aged quite well. It's just something you can absolutely just pick up, dive into, with you just taking time to explore. You're trying to look for mysteries, diving into the story, doing some grinding, or the DLC, which I absolutely adored, the Colosseum DLC, taking on Gilgamesh, the Poo-Poos, the various other returning characters, like you do boss fights against Lightning, the character called Jill Nabat from the first Final Fantasy 13 game. There's Ultros and Typhon, who are some recurring creatures, and there's a few other ones I think as well. Omega. And I really liked leveling up and strategizing for those Colosseum fights because they were like a true test of strength, and that was so much fun for me. I definitely put a lot of time into exploring up and down the timelines, and the Arclight Step especially was a great place for me to grind and exploring just all the different regions and getting all sorts of different creatures, the excitement of finally getting one, and then you level it up and see what its abilities are, and going through that whole loop, trying different loadouts with different monsters, and I ended up like with level 99, I think, for every single job type of the 6 job types: Synergist, Sentinel, Commando, Ravager, Medic, Saboteur, for Noel and Sarah, the 2 main human protagonists. I think I maxed out everything for them. I ended up doing all the Colosseum fights apart from Gilgamesh. I could never do that one when I was a kid. I don't think I've tried it as an adult. But yeah, Final Fantasy 13 2, this is a completely unplanned video. Before I started filming, I didn't even know what I was going to make a video of, but I saw it on my shelf, and I thought Final Fantasy 13 2 is a great game, and like I say, coming from the fact that I was talking to some kids the other day, and they expressed such an interest in Japanese culture, niche stuff, like wanted to know more about Japanese instruments, and they liked anime and stuff. And the kids that like computer games, but they'd never heard of Final Fantasy. They hadn't heard of Persona. They hadn't heard of so many different Japanese game franchises or role-playing games, and that just kind of boggled my mind. And yeah, I'm just curious how many other people are there of various ages, if they haven't heard of these franchises or haven't engaged with them. But for anyone who's still got an Xbox 360, for anyone with a PlayStation 3, or I suppose if you want to risk trying it on the Xbox One Series X, even though I've heard it's a bit dodgy, the emulation of 13.2 on that, I wouldn't recommend the PC version. I've heard very bad things about that one. But if you have the means to be able to play the game, I would absolutely try it out. You don't need to play the first 13 game yourself, because I hadn't played it myself, and there were gaps in my knowledge with 13, and ultimately 13.2 is significantly stronger, completely like non-strict linear game, with loads of free open roaming aspects and loads of side quests and extra content and freedom to explore and freedom to just deviate from the main determined path. And I think absolutely it's a game you can just dive into. All you need to know is Sarah's looking for her sister, and well, Noel's a completely original character anyway, and the previous returning characters don't really feature that much, apart from one character called Hope, who all you need to know is he's a guy who has brains, and he's an old friend of Sarah's. Well, not that you even really get to see them hang out in the first game, but through implication they're old friends. Anyway, yeah, I think it's a very overhated, underrated trilogy in general. People don't really talk about 13.2 at all. In the current climate of games with current generations, largely live service games, rule supreme, which is an absolute tragedy. And in terms of the Final Fantasy series in general, people are looking towards the newest thing, enjoying the more recent entries, or looking back at the very specific classics. And you've got games like World of Final Fantasy or Final Fantasy 13-2 that are great that no one talks about. So I just wanted to do a quick video talking about what I found enjoyment from 13-2, what it means to me, and just going into a little bit. A bit rambly, I know, but like I say, completely unplanned video. And yeah, I think it's a fantastic game. And I totally recommend giving this game a try, because it is a lot of fun. Well, that's all I have to say about that. Not that I had a really great deal to say anyway. I'm tired and I need to do tidying up and stuff. Yay me. Yeah, hope you're all having good days, good lives, all that good stuff. Let me know what games in the Final Fantasy series you've played, or what role-playing games you like in general, or what are some franchises that you're into that maybe were more popular back in the day that people nowadays that you talk to or that are younger than you have no idea about. And it kind of makes you feel a bit old. I mean, I'm only in my mid-20s and people don't even know what Final Fantasy is. I mean, I know it's never been extremely mainstream as it is, I suppose, but I mean, you would think young people who are actually into computer games and, you know, anime and Japanese culture would know about that, but apparently not. It's unusual. But anyway, thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next video. Bye for now.